Gandhi was an Indian lawyer, anti-colonial nationalist, and a political ethicist who employed nonviolent resistance to lead a successful campaign for India's independence from British rule. He inspired movements for civil rights and freedom across the world. Gandhi wrote, "I learned the lesson of nonviolence from my wife. When I tried to bend her to my will, her determined resistance to my will on the one hand, and her quiet submission to suffering my stupidity on the other, ultimately made me ashamed of myself and cured me of my stupidity in thinking that I was born to rule over her. And in the end, she became my teacher in nonviolence." Even Gandhi, one of the many spiritual teachers of nonviolence, had conflict in his own personal life and had to find a way to cope with it and learn from it. Conflict is a natural, normal part of the human condition. Conflict is not a bad thing. It's not about struggle to be dominant over another person or to make them see the world the way you want them to. It's simply about difference. Difference of perception, priority, need. If we are in any kind of relationship, at work, creating a product, in a congregation, developing a budget, in a friendship, deciding where to go to eat, we will be in some sort of conflict at one point or another. How we approach conflict, how we manage our emotions while in conflict, and how we bring our spirituality into the conflict determines whether the conflict will ultimately be resolved in a healthy and satisfying way. I believe there are ways of resolving conflict without the damaging effects of anger or rage. I believe in a faith-centered, non-violent way of resolving conflict that includes the co-creation of a resolution made together using each of our minds, hearts, spirits, and our humility.
This quote is from The Road Less Traveled by psychiatrist and author M. Scott Peck. There are two ways to confront or criticize another human being: with instinctive and spontaneous certainty that one is right, or with the belief that one may be right, arrived at through scrupulous self-doubting and self-examination. The first is the way of arrogance. It's the most common way of parents, spouses, teachers, and people generally in day-to-day affairs. It's usually unsuccessful, producing more resentment than growth and other effects that were not intended. The second way is of humility. It's not as common, requiring as it does a genuine extension of oneself, but it is more likely to be successful.
Before I go more deeply into discussing nonviolent resistance, I think it's important to acknowledge that political and social conflict can feel so much bigger than day-to-day conflict. And so many of us are burned out, fatigued, and overwhelmed with the state of our culture and politics right now. So many of us asking, what can one person or even a small group of people possibly do to change societal norms or state laws? In our world right now, there is so much hate, resentment, polarization. It is challenging even to decide where to put our energy and what to resist. We only have so much political power and physical, mental, and emotional energy. And there are so many issues just here in Florida that cry out for resistance. Restrictions on women's reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights, making gun ownership easier without even requiring any kind of training on safe use of firearms, restricting access to certain books or to the history of African Americans in this country, restricting medically necessary supports for the transgender community. Where and how do we use nonviolent resistance to confront so many issues? It is easy to get frustrated, angry, scared, overwhelmed, even paralyzed by so many issues.
Yes Magazine reporting fellow Melissa Hellman considered what civil disobedience at Standing Rock teaches us. Resistance is bolstered in our divine identity that resists the seduction of the darkness in ourselves and in the temptation and lies that a proto-fascist system might throw at us. Resistance at Standing Rock is a spiritual and moral act, as well as an environmental and political act. We can be part of an organized mass movement of non-violent protest grounded in the deepest spiritual principles of compassion, modeled on Martin Luther King Jr., the Dalai Lama, Gandhi, and Polish labor activist Lech Walesa. Such a resistance that holds a high moral ground is blessed by invisible powers and has an extraordinary capacity to shift the situation.
As a minister, I am called to speak both with a prophetic voice telling you, everyone, those in power, the truth as I see it, and a pastoral voice, giving comfort to those who are suffering as well as hope for what the future might bring. I do not avoid speaking truth, whether it is in front of political leaders or in a congregational meeting or anywhere. Even if, as I understand, the truth may be difficult to hear, even if the truth maybe results in conflict. But speaking truth must be tempered with a humble spirit, my own self-reflection, and a willingness to be open to engage with and listen to those with whom I am speaking. Just telling someone that they are wrong, or that they are racist, or that they are fascist will not result in changing their hearts or minds. By being willing to understand how they came to their truths and made their decisions, I can begin a process of communication that can result in change. nonviolent resistance isn't always about rallies and petitions. It's also about interpersonal engagement for change.
Mohandas Gandhi wrote, "If someone with courage and vision can rise to lead in nonviolent action, the winter of despair can, in the twinkling of an eye, be turned into the summer of hope. Nonviolence is not a garment to put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our being. Nonviolence, which is a quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. It is a plant of slow growth, growing imperceptibly but surely."
I want to say that line again. Nonviolence is not a garment to put on and off at will. I repeat that because I believe in order to participate in nonviolent resistance, nonviolence has to be braided into our character, into our thoughts, words, and deeds. Nonviolence is not just outwardly focused on the issues faced in society. It is also inwardly focused on how we are with ourselves, with those we love, in our communities and congregations, literally with everyone that we come into contact with as we live and move through life. I will personally admit that I am not perfect at this. Being nonviolent in all that you do, well, I try, I aspire. My thoughts, my words, my deeds. Being nonviolent does not mean my life is free of conflict, whether in my marriage with my lovely wife or in committee meetings or working with political action networks or nonprofits or other people who have different faiths than me. Even though all these people are working to make the world a better place, a more loving place, a beloved community for all. It does mean I think, speak, and live my truth with as much peace in my heart and compassion as I possibly can for anyone that I come into contact with. Recently, I spoke with an African American minister. His name was Theo Johnson, and the South Dade branch president of the NAACP. The three of us had a talk. I was talking with them about allyship on issues that were coming out of Tallahassee. Without hesitation, I spoke of the many issues that I felt passionately about, including LGBTQ and transgender rights. I also said that many people I knew in this congregation and other groups I'm part of would like to look to these members of the African American community to take the lead on issues of importance to them. Both the minister and the president of the local NAACP said that transgender issues, LGBTQ issues, would be issues that not a lot of African American churches or members of the NAACP would easily be able to rally around. On the other hand, they also said they didn't want other people's rights restricted, other human rights restricted. After much discussion with periods of silence and tension, they said they might be willing to help us with LGBTQ and transgender issues if they believed that we would stand beside them when they fought for the issues that were important to them. And he said, we, meaning white people, LGBTQ people, transgender people, women. Neither the minister nor the local president felt that there had been a history of non-black people standing with them when they were in need, when they were fighting for their rights. They told me trust would have to be built. And I assured them. I assured them that I would rally when they called. I have joined, since that meeting, the NAACP and plan to be at one of their witness events in a couple of weeks. As our conversation came to a close, I hope that he would find a way to be an ally on some of the issues that I felt passionate about. And so I asked. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. I really believe I planted a seed, and that trust will have to be nurtured by my following up on my words with actions. And who knows where that seed will grow. I believe its potential is unlimited. This interaction we shared with peace in our hearts and a willingness to engage despite tension is as much nonviolent resistance as holding a Black Lives Matter rally. My friends, having this Black Lives Matter sign in our church and on our property, even if it's covered up when there's voting going on here in this building, and having this LGBTQ flag in our church and flying in front of our building are acts of nonviolent resistance. I'll tell you a story about a member of my congregation in Naperville, Illinois, who had the same LGBTQ flag in front of his home in a very conservative neighborhood. There were people all around his neighborhood with signs like, "Make America Great Again." So this was his single act of nonviolent resistance. Over time, some of the people that lived near him asked him about his flag. They didn't know what all the colors meant or what its meaning was, and he gladly talked about it and why it was important to him. Some of his neighbors also began to display LGBTQ flags. And eventually, in this conservative neighborhood, there were 5, 6, 7 flags waving in support of the LGBTQ community. All of them practicing nonviolent resistance. We here, as the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Miami, practice nonviolent resistance. Our Unitarian Universalist principles call us to treat everyone with respect, compassion, and equity. If you go out on some of our cars in the parking lot, you will find bumper stickers that say, "Hate has no home here," or "Abortion is health care," and so many others. We here educate ourselves on dealing with the issues of the marginalized, the handicapped, people of color, women, children, the homeless, returning citizens. We sign petitions, attend rallies, write letters to the editor, hold discussions. For over 3 years here, we have worked to decenter whiteness in our governance in this church. I have preached on nonviolent communication, modeled nonviolent communication, both in this congregation and in my public initiatives. In short, in the short time that I have been here, even with the extreme impediments of COVID and quarantine, my friends, this community has built relationship with allies, including interfaith and intercultural groups, nonprofits working to make this world a better place. And some of us, unbeknownst to everyone in this congregation, have volunteered. We volunteered at Planned Parenthood. We've talked to state and local legislators. We have been involved to make the world a better place, both as part of this community and on our own. All of these things embody nonviolent resistance. And so I ask you to consider, how do you express nonviolent resistance? Don't hold it to yourself. Tell others here what you're doing. We can hold authentic discussions with one another, sharing our truths and expanding our sphere of influence. How can we express nonviolent resistance? I can't answer that question for you, but I know you have ideas. Ideas about how we can make a positive difference, how you and us can make a positive difference resisting racism and other oppressions here in Miami while keeping a humble, compassionate heart and an open mind ready to engage with people who may be very different than us. How can you express nonviolent resistance? We must reflect on this question. Look within ourselves. Consider our own feelings and issues before we work to stem the tide of oppression here in Florida. And I can't wait to see how we continue to answer that question in our lives and in this community.